Hey, how are you? Casey Arndt here from Go the Distance Coaching. I help triathletes do their best at their next XA race, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit today about how you can actually run the whole run leg of your triathlon. This has been a big struggle for me. I'm not great at running. I love the swim, I love the bike. Those typically go pretty well, and then the run, sometimes I end up walking when I didn't really intend to. And so sometimes you will see this happen to other people. Maybe you have a great run, but you notice somebody else. So I wanted to share a little story with you. I was at a sprint try this last weekend, and as I started off on the run leg, I was feeling pretty good. And this young girl cruised past me, running pretty fast on the grass next to the path where we were running. And she went past me, and then I noticed that she stopped to walk. Now, sometimes people do a run walk thing, and that's just their thing. But she looked like she was breathing pretty hard. But as I caught up with her, she started to run again, and this time she ran even faster. And then she stopped to walk again. And later at the turnaround, I caught up with the man who was walking, and then he started to run and then walk. And I could see for both of these runners, they really had not dialed in their run pace, and it was causing them to have to stop and walk. And if this has ever happened to you, I want you to throw me an emoji down there in the comments. This is a really common problem, especially as the distances in these events get longer and it gets more challenging. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how, if you really want to run the whole run leg, if you didn't set out with a run walk strategy to begin with, how you can make sure that you can actually run it. So I've got 4 suggestions for you. So number 1 is, and you're not going to be surprised by this, just be really fit. But the surprising thing might be you need to be really fit for all 3 legs. So if you're super tired after the swim and then you go and get on your bike, you're not really going to recover that much. It's still a race. You're trying to go hard. So if the swim wore you out because you weren't ready for it, or you had a really hard time in the open water for whatever reason, you've already burned a bunch of matches that you are not going to get back. And so that is going to make it harder to do all the other legs of your try. Thankfully, all is not lost. You can still pace the bike well, get some nutrition in, and probably do pretty well at your run. So just because you have a terrible swim doesn't mean your whole race is going to be a disaster. Thankfully, but of course, you'll always do better if you're really prepared for the swim at the distance and pace that you race it, for the bike at the distance and the pace that you race it, and then leading into your run. So if you're not ready to run the whole run, even if it was just an open, say a half marathon or 5K or 10K or whatever, if you weren't ready to just like show up at 7 a.m. and go do a road race at that distance, then of course you're probably going to end up walking in the try because you're already going to be tired, a little bit dehydrated. It's going to be a long day, all right? So you want to be super fit. Not surprising. So you want to be ready, but you also want to make sure that when you show up on race day, your pacing plan for the whole day is set up with that run in mind. If you're not a really strong runner, then you can't just go out there and swim as hard as possible and bike as hard as possible and hang on for the run. One of those is going to have to give, and usually it's going to be the bike. Even if you're an awesome cyclist, if you're a weak runner, you're gonna have to hold back some. You're not gonna be able to ride super crazy and then somehow hang on for the run. So that's really important to keep in mind for all you guys who would love to be doing an aqua bike where you can ride as hard as you want. If you're gonna do the try, you've gotta pace the bike with the run in mind, all right? And number 3 is you need to nail your nutrition on the bike so that when you come off the bike, you're not already really dehydrated or really hungry or really overfed. If you do any of those 3 things, the run obviously will be harder. And so you want to take advantage of the bike as a good place to digest things. It's easy to eat and absorb stuff because you're just sitting there. You know, there's not a lot of jostling. And if you're pacing things right, you're not necessarily going really hard on the bike anyway. So that's going to be a great place to get in calories, get in liquids, get in salt, whatever it is that you need for the conditions of the day. And then when you're getting about 30 to 20 minutes before you're going to switch to the run, you want to make sure that you just let the last bit of fluid and calories process through your gut, because if it's still sitting in your stomach and you're coming into the run with a big load, it's going to be harder for your body to process that. So you want to make sure that it's ready for the run. So my recommendation is when you're about 20 minutes out on the bike, stop eating, stop drinking, cruise into the finish, get your transition done, and then when you show up at mile 1, you're going to be ready to take in some liquid and take in some fuel, and your body's going to be all set to process that correctly. Whereas if you sat down and ate a sandwich in transition, some people get away with that, but it's possible that that's just going to be too much for your gut to manage as you go out onto the run. So set those things up well. Now, when you get to the run, you need to pace this really carefully. And a lot of people are super happy to be off their bike. Maybe they see their family in transition. They've got all these this excitement to head out onto the run, and sometimes you really run way too fast, and this is so super common. So even if you're not really that well prepared for the run, you may find yourself running at a pace over that first mile that you absolutely cannot sustain. And that is really not where you want to be. So as you're preparing, you want to keep this in mind. So when you think back to my story from earlier, those folks did not have a pace in mind that they could sustain, whereas I did. I felt like I knew exactly where to sit to be able to finish that race, and basically run the exact same pace the whole way to the end, and then maybe give a little sprint at the end if there was a little bit left. But those guys, every time they ran, that pace was too hard to sustain. So if you're getting out on some brick workouts, coming off of the bike, you want to learn this incredible patience to be able to set out of transition at a pace that's not crazy, that's not so fast that you're not going to be able to sustain that. So you don't want to start out so fast that everything just goes downhill. You want to start off conservatively enough that if you're feeling good, you might actually be able to go a little faster as you keep going. So it's hard to learn the patience, it's hard to learn how to do that, so you're going to want to practice that, and you're going to have something that you're monitoring on race day. So if you've got all the gadgets, I'll have all the gadgets. I love numbers. Some of the things that you can look at to make sure that you're setting off okay, for the first few miles, you're not really going to pay for an overly fast pace with a high heart rate. So I always recommend, especially in the first mile, monitoring your pace. Okay, so if you know that your long easy run pace has been, say, 10 minutes per mile, or whatever it is for you that keeps you from huffing and puffing and still being able to do, your long run pretty long, then you're going to want to make sure that you're not exceeding that pace. This is not the time to be sprinting. So you're going to watch that pace. After you've been at that pace for a while, your heart rate is going to start to rise. Coming off the bike, usually your heart rate will go up because now you're doing weight-bearing exercise. Your run heart rate will tend to run a little bit higher. If you know where your heart rate can run for a long run and still continue, then maybe somewhere in that vicinity is going to be a good place for you to run for the first 50 to 60% of your run leg, and then you can start to monitor heart rate. But when you start off, I like to be watching pace. Now, what I was watching at my race last weekend was something that's new, that I was testing out for the first time in a race situation, but I've been using on my training for a while, and that is run power. So I ride with power on my bike, and I have this little foot pod from Stride, that's Stride with a Y, and it measures running power. Now, this is a pretty new technology, and I wasn't sure how it was going to work out, but using some of their online tests, they gave me a power number that they thought should be reasonable for a 5K that would take about as long as I thought I was going to run out there. And so I took the number that they gave me and I subtracted off about 15 watts, because this was at the end of a try instead of just a fresh 5K off of, just sitting in the car in the early morning. And I just ran at that number. And what I saw was in the first half mile or so, I was definitely over that number by a bit. And so then I pulled that back and I managed to sit right at that number the whole way. So, by the time I got to the end of the 5K, that girl who was streaking past me and then walking, she was almost half a mile behind me. The guy that I saw at the turnaround who was walking and then running and then not walking and then running, he was also about a minute or two behind me by the finish. And I should have said, hey guys, look, we all seem to be about the same pace. Why don't you just run with my steady pace and we'll all finish together? And I was really happy with how things went. I plan to increase my fitness so that I can dig a little deeper at the end of that try, instead of just finding a running pace that is sustainable, to find a running pace that's not only sustainable but challenging, that really kicks my butt by the end. That's my next goal, but this worked really well for me. So if you have a really good or funny run gone bad sort of story, I would love to share those, and the other people who watch this video I'm sure would love to learn from your experience. So put those in the comments. We can really help each other with our experiences, whether good or bad, and oftentimes it's the bad experiences that teach us so much. So if you're willing to share yours with us, or maybe you're an anonymous friend, you can put those in the comments and I will leave you some suggestions if you want them. And you can always contact me, especially if you're planning to race Ironman 70.3 in Galveston or Ironman in Texas next spring. I would love to hear from you. I have some coaching spots available. So if you would like a free coaching consultation to see if we would be a good fit to work together, please contact me via direct message and I would love to talk to you. All right, you guys have a great week. It's so good to see you. Thanks for watching. Thanks, Lisa, for watching. And I will see you out there on the race course, and I'll see you right here next week, 1 o'clock Wednesday. Bye-bye.